Hey, it's Steve Stewart, Peach's podcast engineer. You know how at the end he says, without me and Kayla Sloan, this show would not be possible? Yeah, that's true. So let me tap on the play button here and give you a taste of what Peach has got in store for you today.
I met my now wife who had a bunch of med school debt. I thought, well, okay, she's got a little bit of med school debt. We'll just put it into a spreadsheet and we'll figure out what monthly payment we need to make on it. And we'll be out of debt in a certain number of years and it'll be real straightforward. Then I discovered there's loan forgiveness programs and there's programs where you can pay based on your income. And there's all these different options that you have, even if you're making a lot of money or not a lot of money that you could use to potentially pay less than what you owe on your student loan debt or cut your interest rates through something like refinancing.
Alrighty, everyone, this is the Money Peach Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Peach, and I'm going to be bringing on some of the most amazing people I can find so they can tell you how they do their life and their money the right way. My guest on the show today is the founder of StudentLoanPlanner.com, the popular website founded by Travis Hornsby, helping people pay off student loans and save a ton of money on interest. Now, before coming on the show, Travis was highly recommended to me by many podcasters. He is the expert when it comes to paying off your student loan. In fact, he reports he's helped over 1,000 clients pay off over $300 million in student loan debt. And he's also helped his same clients save $60 million in interest by paying those loans off more efficiently and faster. So I want Travis to come on the show to share with you how to go about student loans. What are some of the options you have out there? What are some of the repayment programs, loan forgiveness programs, and just the stuff that you need to know about if you have a student loan. So without further ado, let me bring on Travis Hornsby, founder of StudentLoanPlanner.com. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I got Travis Hornsby, founder of Student Loan Planner. Here's what's really cool, Travis, is before I give you this big introduction, this grabbed my attention right away. So I'm going to just share it with everybody. Have you really helped people personally, consulted over $300 million in student loan debt? You've helped people pay off $300 million in student loan debt. And then also, can I ask you this? Have you helped people save $60 million in student loan debt?
On a projected basis. And the reason is, the 1.5 trillion in student loan debt number gets thrown around a lot. Actually, about 7% of the student loan borrowers owe 40% of the debt. So we're really helping people with really monster debt loads. And so that's how we've reached a number like that so quickly.
So it's pretty wild, Travis, is, you were recommended to the show by a friend of ours and said, you got to reach out to Travis Hornsby, get him on the show. This guy is helping people save massive amounts of money in student loan debt. He's helping them pay off their debt for good. Student loan debt is, the research I've seen is it's the one debt that consistently goes up and up and up and up, and it's passing all the other debts over time. I've yet to meet anybody that has consulted and helped over 1,000 people here save over $60 million just in the way they pay their loans off, but has helped people really pay off $300 million in debt. That blows my mind. And then to take that a step further is I needed to do my research before the show. No one else has even come close to doing what you've done on an individual level. That's impressive.
Yeah, it all comes down to just having a need and a passion for this space because of what I went through personally with my wife's med school debt. That's how it all started.
So I could definitely tell that I can tell our listeners, you are definitely the subject matter expert when it comes to student loans and all the ins and outs of student loans. A few episodes back, we had a lady that came on that shared with how, before you go to school, how to apply for scholarships and how to get grants and how to start early and what, where to look for. And we looked at the front end of that. And we've had somebody else come on talking about student loans and how they work, right? Just kind of giving us the overview of how does a student loan actually work. And now we're having you come on the show as kind of like this third piece to, really talk about how to pay these things off. What are some of the options you have out there? How this complexity can be simplified. Before we jump into all of this, how you became the expert, like you were just talking about, is so your wife or your fiance is a physician. And I'm sure, as I'm reading articles here that it's not uncommon now for dentists, physicians, specialties like that to have $1 million in student loan debt. Kind of walk us through, what did you experience personally before we jump in?
Sure. So I was very lucky in that I had no student loan debt when I graduated college. And I went to work at Vanguard, actually. And I was a bond trader, and I was on the team that managed a lot of money for Vanguard. And I met my now wife, who had a bunch of med school debt. And, it didn't really come up early in the relationship. I mean, she mentioned it once we started getting more serious. And I thought, well, okay, she's got a little bit of med school debt. It's probably modest, and we'll just put it into a spreadsheet and we'll figure out what monthly payment we need to make on it. And we'll be out of debt in a certain number of years, and it'll be real straightforward. Then I discovered there's loan forgiveness programs, and there's programs where you can pay based on your income. And there's all these different options that you have, even if you're making a lot of money or not a lot of money, that you could use to potentially pay less than what you owe on your student loan debt, or cut your interest rates through something like refinancing. So it was a lot more complicated than initially what I thought it was. So I decided, okay, well, I've got all these Excel skills from being a bond trader. This is going to be easy. I'm going to create a model so we can put her loans into the spreadsheet and see what everything costs. And I did that, and it took me a lot longer than I thought it would to build a model, because there was so many different options. I used that to help her, and she was like, hey, this is pretty good. You should help our friends that also have a lot of student loan debt, because we were in a big city in the Northeast where, going to grad school is kind of like taking your dog out for a walk. Everybody does it. And then so I started helping friends of her. Those friends told their friends, and it kind of got started slowly like that. And then I finally decided, okay, this is a big enough problem that I need to go ahead and make a website and start blogging about it more regularly. I did that, and then realized, hey, you know what? This is really my calling right now. I need to focus on this. And started officially October 2016. And since then, it's been off to the races.
You start Student Loan Planner. I'm on your site right now. Very, very simple. So we'll put links in our show notes, but it's studentloanplanner.com. It says here, you have a calculator that you can help people get started with. Like you said, going back a minute ago, you said the complexity of student loans. It's not as simple as you get a auto loan and you have a 36-month repayment plan, you pay the car off and you own it, right? It's a little bit different when it comes to student loans. Kind of walk us through, why is it different? What are some of the things that most students, I'm reading an article here that says 1/3 of the students that were asked in this study who are currently in school with student loans could not explain at all how the interest worked on their student loan. I want to ask, how does it work?
Sure. So most people are familiar with the undergrad experience. That's the way that most people experience their student loans. That's very different from the way that it is in grad school. As an undergrad, you usually will get either subsidized student loans or unsubsidized student loans, and probably a mix of the two. Subsidized student loans are the very best because they don't accrue interest while you're in school. And then once you're out of school, you can pay them on an income-driven repayment program and actually get 100% of your interest subsidized for 3 years after graduation. So subsidized student loans are fantastic to have. Unsubsidized student loans are different because they accrue interest while you're in school. And everyone who takes out any loans at all for grad school is taking out unsubsidized student loans. Those loans will accrue interest while you're in grad school. That can really run up a big bill, while you're studying, especially for somebody going for a 4-year program and for a professional degree. There's also a third type called the Grad Plus student loan, and that loan covers anything over and above the limits that are put in place for the Stafford loan program. So, for example, if you go to an extremely expensive grad school, you can cover as much as you want with the Grad Plus program, and it's also an unsubsidized student loan that accrues interest while you're in school. Frequently, what you'll have happen is somebody might owe $200,000 of principal, and they might have $40,000 of accrued interest that they would graduate with. And when they graduate, that $40,000 of accrued interest would capitalize into their principal balance, and then their interest charge will go up upon graduation.
Okay, so kind of just recap this so I fully understand. Undergrad loans could be subsidized or unsubsidized. Subsidized loans for like an undergraduate program. You're going to school, you have the loan out, you're not accruing any interest until you graduate, correct?
Right.
But then if you go to higher level learning, grad school, you're becoming a doctor or maybe getting a master's or something like that. Those are all 100% unsubsidized loans?
Yes, there's only a couple exceptions, and even undergrads can still take out some unsubsidized student loans. But for grad school, there's only a couple limited types of loans that you can get through certain federal programs that might carry some level of an interest subsidy while you're in school. The vast majority of the debt that people will borrow is going to be unsubsidized.
To your point then, if you have $200,000 in student loans to take out to go to grad school, from the day one that you take it out, you're going to start accruing interest to whatever the interest rate is. So my next question was, what is kind of the overall average interest rate you're seeing with unsubsidized student loans?
It's going to be about 6.6%. I think off the top of my head for the upcoming school year. And then Grad Plus is going to be around 7.6. That's obviously very high. I mean, you're looking at interest rates that are multiples of that, which you would pay for a car loan because of the way the federal system is set up.
Let's just say 6.6 to 7.6. So around 7% interest. And that's accruing every year you're in school. You got it featured here in Business Insider, and you did a really good job of, kind of just laying it out so we can see it. And you talk about this accrued interest. So if you have, let's say, $200,000, you're accruing what would be $14,000, if that's 7%, $14,000 every single year in interest.
Sure. And so say you're on an income-driven payment option where your payments are based on your income. Let's say that you're paying $4,000 a year based off of your income being limited. If you're accruing $14,000 of interest and you're paying $4,000, then there's still a $10,000 gap, right? And what happens is that $10,000 interest goes into your accrued interest balance, and it doesn't go into the principal balance so long as you're actually in an income-driven repayment program. You would owe $210,000 after that year, and you would have $200,000 be principal and $10,000 be accrued interest.
So you're saying, just to sum this up, that if you're in an income-driven repayment plan, and we didn't even talk about what an income-driven repayment plan is, but if you are inside that, you're going to be paying the interest first.
Well, you're always paying the interest off totally first before you're actually touching principal on an income-based repayment option. And that's kind of to be expected. Now, the reason why that's a good thing is compare student loan debt to credit card debt. So credit card debt has maybe a 20% interest rate. If you're making the minimum payment, that 25% interest rate is compounding on you. And you're just getting slammed with compound interest in reverse. Whereas contrast that to student loans, if you're paying less than what you owe in interest every month or every year on an income-based option, then that means that that interest actually accrues and grows at a linear rate instead of a compound rate. So that's a big, big difference. I hope people can appreciate how big of a difference that is. So when you're in forbearance, you kind of have your interest treated somewhat like a credit card. It's going to compound on you over time. There's been a lot of scandals recently because the student loan servicers that are responsible for managing the nation's student loan portfolio are kind of taking the easy way out, and they're putting people into forbearance instead of helping them sign up for income-driven plans. That's a big negative for the borrower because that person could have their interest growing at a linear rate, and instead these servicers are putting them into plans that are causing the interest to grow at a compound rate.
So just for our listeners, just so they get the visual, we always talk about this. If you're earning compound interest, it's the eighth wonder of the world because, your money makes money on top of your money. So kind of going back to, I think we've had some guests on the show talking about this in the past, but, let's just say you have $1,000, you get a 10% interest rate. And so your balance would be $1,100, 1,000 plus 10%, $1,100. And then if you left it in there, you would compound on that interest rate. The $1,100 now getting 10% wouldn't be $100 the next year. It'd be $100 plus the 10% of the first 100, which is complicated, but that's compounding. It grows faster. Linear is totally different. It is growing steadily at the same rate. It's not going up or down. Linear meaning like a line. So if you just pictured a graph, you'd see this line going up. What Travis is saying here is when you're inside an income-driven repayment plan, you're not going up compounding like a credit card. Your interest is linear.
Exactly. So at the very worst, a student loan, if it's on a federal system, if it's a federal student loan, the student loan should be growing at no worse than a linear rate, which means that student loans can always be managed. So whenever I get into situations when I really delve into people's student loan portfolios, it's usually the people who have some sort of big combination of giant private loans with their federal loans or all private loans that really have a lot of difficulty. Whereas people with just federal loans, I've seen people have only federal loans that have had $1 million balances, and it's still relatively straightforward to manage their situation without it causing major financial changes to their lives.
Okay, so you brought up a good point then. Let's dive in and talk about the difference between like a federal student loan and a private loan. How are those differentiated?
The federal government took over the origination of most all student loans in 2010. Used to be kind of a mix of banks and the government that were in a partnership together. But in 2010, the government said, we're just going to do all student loan lending directly. So we're going to cut out the middleman. And so most people that started school or were in school after that date are going to have mostly federal student loans. If you have private student loans, especially ones that you originated while you were in school, you probably originated them either because you had cosigners that wanted to get you a lower interest rate, or because for whatever reason, your financial aid office didn't steer you in the right direction and you got saddled with a bunch of private debt at a really high interest rate. The final type of private student loan is a refinanced student loan. So you had federal student loans at a 7%, and you graduated, you have a great job, you owe about 1 times your income, and then you decided, okay, well, I want to get a lower interest rate. I want to get something like 4 or 5% because I'm a better credit risk than 7%. And so you change out your federal student loans with new loans at a private lender in exchange for a lower interest rate. So a federal student loan is something that's eligible for income-driven repayment options. It's got better forbearance protection, but it usually has a higher interest rate. And a private student loan is something that was either originated while you were in school for various reasons, or something that you voluntarily created yourself that you refinanced in order to get a lower interest rate so that you could get out of debt faster.
That makes sense. And then going back, we talked about unsubsidized and subsidized loans. A subsidized loan is it known as a Stafford loan?
There's Stafford unsubsidized and Stafford subsidized. Those are the two different kinds of Stafford loans.
How do they differentiate?
The Stafford subsidized are the ones that have that complete coverage of the interest costs while you're in a deferral, while you're in a school program. And then the Stafford unsubsidized loans are the ones that accrue interest while you're in school. And Stafford loans in general have a limit. You can't borrow more than a certain amount of dollars on the Stafford loan program. And in 2006, basically what Congress decided to do, and the Bush administration, they decided that, okay, well, the Stafford loan limits, we don't like how this is causing people to turn to the private loan market to take on additional debt if the school wants more money than that for tuition, right? So they created this Grad Plus program that is a federal loan too and acts in concert with the Stafford loans. That is the loan type that can be issued for up to the cost of attendance for a program. This is called a Grad Plus loan. Plus is the key word. So there's a Grad Plus loan and there's a Parent Plus loan. So plus loans are something that you can issue as much of them as you want, as much of them as the financial aid office will give you. If you're going to a school in New York City for a professional degree program, you might borrow $100,000 a year on this program. That's how much you could borrow if you can get the numbers to add up for your cost of attendance. And so this Grad Plus program, in my opinion, is what really caused the amount of student debt to really explode, because you saw student debt between like the mid 2000s and today, it's basically quintupled, which is really kind of staggering if you think about it.
So give me some examples then, Travis, of some of your clients that you've consulted, reading through a couple of your articles here that you've been featured in, but it sounds like it's not that uncommon anymore for you to run into somebody with literally $1 million in student loan debt. Or is it $1 million, or is it more of they have a principal balance, but then the accrued interest puts them at $1 million? Kind of walk me through maybe an example of somebody you've worked with recently.
It's more the latter. I mean, the people that have had about $1 million of student loan debt have not been, super numerous. So I will say that. I mean, we've had maybe like 3 or 4 that have had individually balances that large. That's interesting though, because I think there's about 100 of them in the country, according to the Wall Street Journal. Basically, what that would look like to get $1 million in debt is you would attend an undergraduate school that's pretty expensive, so probably private school in a high cost of living area. And then you would go on to a 4-year professional degree program, maybe like a dental school. So you might rack up about $550,000 for a dental degree, also in a high cost of living area. After that, you would rack up maybe an additional $200,000 to $300,000 to go to a specialty program to become maybe a OMFS surgeon or an orthodontist. So that's the most common example that I see that puts somebody up in the $1 million range, is somebody who had an expensive undergrad program followed by an expensive grad program followed by another expensive grad program. The average client that we work with owes about $280,000 of student debt. We've seen people that have owed $40,000 or $50,000 that still want our student loan plan services all the way to the $1 million range. The reason I think why we skew so high in the average debt amount, if somebody has $40,000 of student debt and makes $60,000 and works in the private sector, it's actually probably pretty straightforward to pay that back. You want to refinance it, get the lowest interest rate you can, maybe pick up a cashback bonus for doing so, and just make monster payments on it and kind of follow the popular Susie Orman, Dave Ramsey strategy for getting out of debt. They don't necessarily need to pay a consultant to tell them to cut your spending and increase your monthly payments. It's the people who, are really struggling, don't really know what to do, are very confused about what kind of loans they have. Maybe they have like 20 different line items those are the people who we're really making life-changing impacts for. And those people skew, higher than average debt.
Hey guys, I just wanted to pause and take a second to say thank you from me to you for listening to and supporting the Money Peach podcast. Without listeners like you, this show definitely would not be possible, so thank you. The number one question that I receive is this: Peach, I just don't know where to start when it comes to my money. So many of us out there are living paycheck to paycheck. We have tons of debt. We're not making any headway. We can't save any money. We want to go on a freaking vacation where we pay cash for it. Oh, and let's talk about retirement savings and kids' college planning on top of that, right? Where do you start? Well, that's why we created the cash flow formula. The cash flow formula is the same system that Andrea and I used to pay off $52,000 in debt in only 7 months. And the best part is it's 100% free, meaning we are going to send you the free tools and a free lesson on how to set up your own cash flow formula. So to get started, go over to getcashflowformula.com. That's GET cashflowformula.com. Once again, head on over to getcashflowformula.com to get your free copy and your free lesson on how to get started the right way. All right, guys, now back to the show.
So Travis, let's say you have a client that comes to you. Let's say there's a listener here and they have $280,000 in student loan debt. They're your average client. You sit down with them. What's going to be something that you're going to start them off with? If they're sitting there, let's just say, we'll use easy numbers here, that they are an attorney. They have a good income. It costs them $280,000 in total student loan debt. Now they're at this point, they're seeing the reality of, wow, I make great money, but I don't have anything to show for it because these student loans are just out of control. Where would you start with them?
So I would say first, if they have $280,000 of student debt, we'll say at a 7% interest rate. A very good salary for an attorney is kind of a loaded term because that would probably mean something like $80,000 or $90,000. A very good salary as an attorney is technically big law, right? In New York City or Los Angeles or something like that, where you could be making $180,000 a year. The problem is most attorneys do not get that kind of salary, right? Most attorneys are working in small to mid-sized firms. Maybe they're doing a mix of various kinds of law. Maybe they're making, like I said, that $80,000 to $90,000 level. So that person is making very good money in contrast to most of America, right? The median household income is $50,000. So 80 to 90 grand is great money, but relative to a $280,000 student debt load, that can make that person feel impoverished. So what I would tell them is, let's say that person that's got the $280,000 in debt, let's say they were on an extended repayment plan where they're paying maybe $1,500 a month on the loans. They're not going to be making very much progress at all in the principal. Maybe they're paying down a token amount of principal with that meaningful payment. And that's not really helping anyone. So what I would ask them instead is, have you considered doing something like pay as you earn, where you could pay a percentage of your income instead of some fixed dollar amount? And in this case, the person would pay about $515 a month on an $80,000 income. And that $500 or so monthly payment would increase as their income increases. At the end of those 20 years that they're making payments, they would owe about $500,000 if they started out with $280,000. And on that $500,000, they would have to pay income taxes as if they got a bonus at the end of that 20-year repayment period. So this lawyer is going to have to come up with about $200,000 as a lump sum to pay the IRS in 2038. In this example that we're using, that's a 20-year repayment period that they're on pay as you earn. So they would have to come up with $200,000 all at once. Now that sounds awful, but if you run the math and you compare doing the 10% of your income plus this tax payment at the end, the value of that in today's dollars works out to being $100,000 cheaper than even the best private refinancing scenario. So this person is probably struggling to make ends meet if they're trying to pay back such a gargantuan debt. Instead, they can set up their loans in a plan that's reasonable, and they can create a virtuous feedback loop by directing some of that money that would have gone into their student loan debt into saving for retirement, lowering their taxable income, which further lowers their student loan payment, which gets them even more loan forgiveness.
This is where you come in, right? This is where it gets really complicated. Like you said, somebody that, has a $60,000 or a $40,000 student loan, makes $60,000 a year, refinance it into a lower interest rate, attack your debt like crazy, the Dave Ramsey, Susie Orman way, and you're out of debt. But this is something completely different. So this scenario you just took us through here, you used an income-driven repayment plan. This has to be with a federal backed student loan, correct?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so you have a federally backed student loan. Like we said, we use the $280,000. So they're going to have this loan for, is it 20 to 25 years? What's that number?
So it depends on the repayment plan you select. So in this case, I went with the plan that's a 20-year repayment plan. Sometimes it's better to go with the 25-year repayment plan, as weird as that sounds, because the 25-year repayment plan called the REPAYE plan, it's revised pay as you earn. That plan is a newer plan. That one takes 25 years to pay back for grad school loans. But the revised pay as you earn plan comes with this really unique interest subsidy provision. So the revised pay as you earn will pay 50% of all the interest that you're not covering with your student loan payment. So in that example that we talked about much earlier, a $200,000 loan where your accruing interest is $14,000 a year and you're paying $4,000 of it with your required payment, you have $10,000 left over. That $10,000 would normally all accrue onto your balance that you would now owe $210,000. But what the revised pay as you earn program does is it takes that $10,000 leftover interest that your income driven payment option didn't pay and it covers half of it. So the government would literally wipe away $5,000 of that $10,000 and you would never see it. So that program, the revised pay as you earn program, is a fantastic way for people to keep their interest costs lower while they're working towards either loan forgiveness or an eventual refinancing if they're in a low income period, currently. So an example would be going with the attorney example, attorney who takes a very low paying, clerkship or some sort of internship for 1 or 2 years, they could cut their interest on their loan by as much as half for a couple of years while they're doing this 1 or 2 year thing, which saves them thousands of dollars.
So a minute ago in the scenario you gave, you talked about how after, we'll say in the PAYE program, PAYE, you use a 20-year example. They say after the 20 years, they're going to have that bonus, you said, because it's forgiveness, right? So the government looks at it as a bonus. And what was the amount of tax that you said would be due? Was it right around $500,000?
The remaining balance that's left over on their loans in that example would be $500,000 because the loan grew because they weren't covering all the interest payments. And so then the government's going to see that $500,000 as a bonus and ask for taxes on a $500,000 bonus.
And you're just going to assume maybe like a 40% rate. You're talking, upwards of $220,000, correct?
And really, there's one huge exception that I didn't mention to this, Chris. It's the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. Every type of loan forgiveness is really asking you to work for 20 to 25 years, and then you're going to have to pay taxes on the forgiven balance, except for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, because on that program, you pay based off of the PAYE program, PAYE, or the REPAYE program, Revised Pay as you earn, REPAYE. And if you're on one of those two programs, then the loans, not only does it only take you 10 years for the loans to be forgiven, the government does not tax you on the forgiven balance under that plan.
Gotcha. The thing that's scary to me is at the end of this 20 or 25 years, you're still on the hook for a couple $100,000 to the IRS.
It's very scary. So actually people in the public sector and the not-for-profit sector that have a lot of student loans are actually significantly more protected than people that work in the private sector.
Gotcha. You're helping people, come up with this strategy. Then are you helping them set up some kind of savings plan to help them cover that tax bill when it comes in 20 years? Because I'm not saying these are just the average person out here, but the average person, 6 out of 10 can't write a check for $1,000. So obviously these are professionals with a lot of student loan debt that have good incomes. But when we get to that point of 20 to 25 years out, we're talking $250,000 owed to the IRS. I mean, are you helping them plan for this ahead of time? Is there some kind of savings plan that you put them in and you could kind of reverse engineer it and say, okay, we're estimating you're going to owe $240,000 starting in year 2050 or whatever it might be. How are they setting themselves up for success so they don't hit that point and say, great, now I owe the IRS $250,000?
Exactly. So, in the example that I used with the attorney, this attorney is going to owe $200,000 all at once. And if you put that into a spreadsheet and say, what's the level monthly amount that you would need to put away into an investment account and a brokerage account to have $200,000 in 20 years, you can say that it's about $540 a month with the 5% assumption of what you're going to earn in that money. I basically will direct them to places that I think will do a great job of helping them invest their money rather than investing it directly. We've chosen not to register as financial advisors. So what I like to do is to point people to Vanguard. If you want to do it yourself, they have the lowest expense ratios of anybody, and you can set up a portfolio of mutual funds or ETFs and manage your own money and put away at least a certain amount of money every month automatically out of your bank account. Or if you prefer more guidance, you could use something like Betterment or Wealthfront or Vanguard's personal advisor service, where you can pay an additional 0.25% approximately to get it managed for you. And the highest service option, of course, is to hire a fee-only financial planner and tell them that you have a liability of $200,000 you have to plan for in 20 years. So we do give them guidance on what we think that the minimum amount of money that they would want to put away for that is and where they might go to do that.
As we can all see here, just listening to all of this, that it's extremely complicated to navigate through student loans and how they work and all the different ways. I mean, whether it's a private loan, a public or a federally backed loan, deferment, forbearance, whether it's subsidized, unsubsidized, parent plus loans, Stafford loans, you can see how, and I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but it's definitely become so confusing that even people like myself who stare at this stuff all day long and dive into it, sometimes still I'm confused on it. Like, how does this work? I think one of the better resources I've seen out there, and this is not just going to have you on the show, it's because I do my research, is I think Student Loan Planner's website might be one of the best resources that I've seen as far as just getting started. So the reason why I'm bringing this up now is not to push Student Loan Planner, but I think it's a great value. When people come to your site, what can they expect?
One thing that I'd say is you don't have to pay us to do anything. I only want to have myself or one of our consultants charge a fee if we're actually going to help you. So I know a lot of people, thousands of people visit our site and learn kind of what they want to learn by reading a lot of our articles. And that's totally fine because a lot of people prefer the do-it-yourself option. So for somebody, like I mentioned, who has less than 1 times their income in debt, they work in a private sector job, they know they want to get a lower interest rate in their student loans, they can just click on our refinancing links and they get anywhere from $200 to $1,000 as a cashback bonus. And they, just go through the lenders and they never talk to us, and that's fine. That helps them. They save thousands of dollars in the interest, and we don't actually need to do any kind of a charge for that. And then for people who have that very complex setup where they owe more than 1.5 times their income, they're overwhelmed, they're not sure what path they should go down, that's really what the student loan planning service is for. So anybody that goes to studentloanplanner.com, I guess what I would suggest is start off by downloading our calculator. The middle button on our homepage, you can go right to downloading our calculator that we use in the student loan planning service. And you can play around with it and see if you understand it or if it looks really confusing and intimidating to you. And that's probably a great starting point as to whether or not you probably should use their service. If that is you, or you do want somebody to kind of do it for you, we're not trying to have somebody sign up for a multi-$1,000 financial plan. We solve one area of your financial life and we do it really well. And so that ranges from like $300 to $600 for like a one-time flat fee. And you can book that. We have the hire us button. You can just click that and read about our service and decide if it's for you or not. So the main goal is to add value to people's life. And, I do this because I'm really passionate about it. And, if we have a lot of revenue and have a lot of clients from it, great. The main purpose though is to help borrowers like my wife.
The reason why I like Student Loan Planner is you've actually gone through it with your wife being a physician and having that debt and getting rid of it or going through the process of paying it down and learning the ins and outs and then helping so many people. You definitely have become the service expert in this niche, not only because you've done it for other people, because you've actually lived and walked in those shoes as well. Really cool, Travis. But before we hang up here, there's always 2 questions I ask every guest on the show. And so the first one I ask is if you could recommend any one book to somebody, what would it be and why?
It's cliche, but the Millionaire Next Door book is just one of my favorites of all time. And I think it's really great to realize that, it's not necessarily what you earn, it's what you keep. A lot of people don't realize that, the mobile home dealer that happens to be a multimillionaire and the physician surgeon that makes $400,000 doesn't have 2 nickels to rub together. That book was the first book that I ever read that really gave me an idea of why that is. That would probably be my favorite book to recommend to people.
So that is my favorite book that I recommend quite a bit when I'm on other people's show and they ask me. That's the one I always refer people to. So it's ironic that you mentioned the same one. The second question I have for you, Travis, is if I were to pick up your phone right now and look at the home screen of your phone, what would it be?
It's a picture of an early morning in the Great Smoky Mountains with the mist rising up from the treetops because I just went on a guy's trip, camped out, and I took the photo early in the morning as the sun was rising. It was a really great memory, so I saved it to the homepage.
Very cool. Hey, Travis, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been extremely helpful, not just for our audience, for me as well. There's so many different moving parts when it comes to student loans. And as the subject matter expert here, you really helped me break them down as far as talking about the interest rates and how they're paid back and deferments and all these different options out there. And if you're listening and you're wondering, am I being as efficient as possible with
my student loans? Could I be paying them down differently? Is there a way I could be saving interest? Head on over to a custom landing page we had Travis build for Money Peach audience. It is studentloanplanner.com/moneypeach. Once again, studentloanplanner.com/moneypeach. We'll have links in the show notes to that. But head on over there. Everything that Travis and I talked about is going to be found inside there. You can schedule a call with Travis if that's something you want to do, or you can use their free tools as well, which that's one of the things that he suggested as well. So Travis, huge fan of yours. Think you're doing a great job, and we just really appreciate you. So thanks so much, Travis.
Thanks so much for having me on, Chris.
And just like that, we wrap up another amazing episode of the Money Peach podcast. All the show notes, the links, anything that Travis and I talked about can be found over at moneypeach.com/session113. That's moneypeach.com/session113. Special thanks goes out to my producer, Steve Stewart, and my assistant, Kayla Sloan. Without them, this show would not be possible. And lastly, thank you so much for listening, downloading, supporting the show the way you do. Without listeners like you, we would not have this show. So thank you from me to you. Have a wonderful week, and God bless. Boom,